Here we are. He's a colleague at Bristol in engineering or computer science and specializes in IT security. And he's worked with us before recently in a meeting dedicated to protecting academic scholarship. And this is going to be an expanded version of that very interesting talk with a couple of, things about how to protect your privacy and integrity online. So thanks, Partha, for doing that, and over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present some of the stuff we did last year. And this has some implications in our daily lives. For example, we all communicate using end-to-end encrypted messaging applications. So I led this work, which was a joint work with Cambridge, and Ross is no more with us, but we had pretty engaging sessions between us and the team from Cambridge in doing this work. So what I'll do is I'll pivot my talk around this work particularly, but I will also ask certain questions and for future research to consider. I'll also bring in some other stuff we did, and also end with a question particularly aimed towards human-centered computing researchers as well, technical researchers. So let me get started. Now, as we know, so this is about me, but I'll start with a quote from Roger Needham. So I had the privilege of meeting Roger towards the end when he was a director at Microsoft Research long back. So he used to say that, there was a time till when God could see everything. And then government saw there is a vacancy to be filled. And it's so prominent these days with the news we are hearing from the US, where Bruce Nash said Dodge is a national cyber attack. So Dodge is going everywhere, picking up people's data, social security data, and all sorts of, pensions, etc. And so, the fact that governments thought there is a vacancy to be filled, we are kind of seeing that in action. We all knew that in action, but now we are kind of seeing that in action. But long back there was this incident with Phil Zimmerman when there was some investigations against him, and I think he was convicted as well for exporting cryptography, because in those days US government, and still they say they don't want crypto to be exported, and UK also attempted something like that. But I remember back in around 2000 or even before that, people actually came out against such proposed. I think it was Blair who was trying to do something similar. But so these are, incidents that we find from history. And this is a map on the global assault on free expression. I'm sure most of you or many of you are familiar with this incident. I'll go quickly to what we want. So this title, Living in an Impossible World, is borrowed from a paper my PhD supervisor wrote, and it's about trust and security, but I find this quite relevant to our topic today. So what do we want? We want to communicate with our peers without being served. That's a security goal we all should have, we all desire to have. We also do not want people to associate us with that Partha spoke to Stephen, and then Stephen spoke to Fabio. So we do want sender and recipient untraceability. And in cases, we also want plausible deniability. We should be able to deny an instance of communication from being happened, to a third party. So if we broadly agree that these are the services we want from the internet, let us see what is the state of play now. Now, I will start with the example of end-to-end encrypted communication messaging systems. So, there are many entities who are interested in an instance of communication. When we communicate using Signal or WhatsApp, there are many people who are interested there. I mean, by interested, I mean not only bad people, but also good people. So there is somebody who is providing us the service. There is Signal who has written the code. There is Signal who is hosting the server. So there are many people who are part of this communication between two entities. The idea is that they should be legitimate, and they should not know what's going inside those packets, apart from just providing that service. So these are the properties we want from an end-to-end encrypted messaging application. And there is a famous quote by Butler Lamson: is authentication is knowing where something came from, and confidentiality is knowing where it is going to. Okay, so in this background, we looked at 6 end-to-end encrypted messaging applications. To be specific, the desktop clients of 6 end-to-end encrypted messaging applications. And what did we find? So we tried to experiment with very simple cloning attacks. By simple cloning attacks, I mean that if I have short-lived access to your machine, say you are going through US border and customs, often you will be asked to share your device with them. Means I have been asked, and many people are asked, to share their devices with people at the border. So that's one instance where somebody has very short-lived access to your device, and that somebody is legitimate in that circumstance, And as somebody who crosses borders without, and as somebody who doesn't have any rights at the immigration, so if you are asked for your password, you have to give your password. You just have no option to say no there. Okay, so in that instance, that person at the border is a legitimate insider to your desktop. Or say in cases of shared household, like devices with shared households with shared devices, in such cases as well, the devices are shared between people, and one can think of it intimate partner violence in such scenarios. Or say many of us who work in the universities are supplied with managed desktops. So my laptop is managed by the IT, and so the IT pretty much knows what's going on in here, and also they can do things without even telling you. So let's think of these 3 scenarios, and in all these scenarios, there are people who can have short-lived access to our devices, and what's the extent of the damage they can do with a short-lived access to our device. So that's what we were experimenting. So what we found was, and the question was that, Signal as a phone, say for example, our phones, the difference between our phone and our desktop is our phones reasonably stays within our control. But that's not the case with our desktops, in particularly laptops or desktops in shared devices, in borders, or for example, in case of managed devices. So what we found was Signal kind of persists with the mobile phone threat model. Signal says that, your mobile phone stays with you, so you should be able to manage it, and nobody should be able to access it. But that's not the case with shared desktops. That's not the case with managed devices. So we could clone a Signal desktop client reasonably easily. It's with a very short-lived access to a device. We could clone a Signal desktop client. We could do the same with WhatsApp. We could do the same with Telegram. WhatsApp was little better in terms of WhatsApp was giving some sort of an alert. WhatsApp was saying that your account is being logged in these 3 places. That was reasonably better than Signal. In case of Signal, what we saw was a yellow flashing bar which said network error. Now that's very ambiguous. What does a network error mean to people? And Telegram, there was no alert compared to Signal or WhatsApp. So this is what we could do with these desktop clients. We could not clone Viber, Element, or Vikrmi. Now, I'm not necessarily giving a certificate of security here, but through our experiments, during our experiments, we could not clone Viber, Element, and Vikrmi. Every time we tried to clone a Viber account or a Vikrmi account, I'll come to Element a bit later. Every time we wanted to clone a Viber or a Vikrmi account, it was throwing us away, because every instance of a Viber or Wickerme instantiation on a machine required participation of the primary device. So you need your primary device, which is the phone, every time you wanted to have another instance of Viber or Wickerme on another device. But that was not the case with Signal. In case of Signal, if I had access to a device with a Signal account, I could just clone it on another device. I do not need the owner to be present or the legitimate account holder to be present while I'm cloning. But that was not the case with Viber and Wickerme. It was same with Element, but we could see some information in case of Element. So we could see who communicated with whom. We could not say if I'm cloning Stephen's account, I could see with whom Stephen communicated, but I could not send and receive messages by being Stephen. I could not do that, but I could at least see Stephen communicated, say, with Fabio or somebody else. So that I could see. So these are the findings we had from. So what one of the important findings from that work was that the delineation between trust and administrative boundary. For example, when we have these border agents or we have managed desktops, all these people are within the administrative boundary of our system. Or in case of shared devices, all of these people are within the administrative boundary of our system. The problem is happening when they are also within the trust boundary. For example, in case of Signal, WhatsApp, and Telegram, all these people were also within the trust boundary. That is why they could compromise our security. Okay, but with Element or Wickerme, being inside the administrative boundary did not necessarily give them a pass inside the trust boundary. And that is why we could not compromise Wickerme or Viber or Element. So this is a very important consideration in security or in generally, that when we live with people or work with people or go through certain places, there would be people who would come into our administrative boundary, and for that period in time they would be legitimate insiders. Now, good systems keep it in mind that those legitimate insiders can have adversarial tendencies. They can do harm. But systems with poorly scoped threat model do not think that legitimate insiders also can do us harm, which we think is the case with Signal and WhatsApp. So when we spoke to these companies, so we took ethics approval and we spoke to these companies before publish. So we had a responsible disclosure, and then we published the paper, but also we spoke to these companies. So Element gave a very interesting answer. Element said us that they mostly have enterprise customers. Say, for example, they supply to intelligence agencies, which is not the case with Signal. So Element supplies or caters to an environment where nobody trusts each other. So in intelligence agencies, etc., people don't trust each other. So their systems or their threat model has been scoped to consider such scenarios. Whereas Signal, WhatsApp, etc., they have mostly retail customers. So they are quite flexible in making that assumption that, okay, in here devices remain with people and they are not shared, and or people with or individuals will be able to keep their devices secure. So that's something we gathered from speaking to them. And this was another piece of work I was involved in. So the NCSC, I think, NCSC, they commissioned or paid some money to develop safety tech. So they said that we will do mandated backdoors along with communication apps or other apps so that they can be used to stop CSAM. So we evaluated 6 such participants, 6 such companies who came up with proposals of mandated backdoors. And so what we thought was that what we found there was that these mandated backdoors, they can be used for all sorts of ways. They can be used for expanded memory scanning without informing the device owner. they can be embedded with within other tools. Now that can have interesting policy externalities. For example, let's think of a scenario that WhatsApp in Android does not allow mandated backdoors or allows mandated backdoors, whereas WhatsApp in Apple does not allow mandated backdoors. If there was a way to do that, and there are technical ways to do that, if it was a reality, then what this would lead to is that either people will kill WhatsApp or people will kill Android. Okay, so not only it is harmful from the perspective of surveillance or other issues, but they also can have very interesting policy externalities if this is allowed. And then we also saw that some of the systems, they said we will do safe defaults. Now, by safe, one of the issues with safe defaults is that users do not have a fixed behavior. And then, context, and like we saw in case of desktop clients, in case of the desktop clients, there are shared households, there are managed devices. So context and user behavior will change. And finally, it goes on, it tends to go into the more philosophical debates on security, that what are the limits of authentication? Like, what is the maximum we should do with authentication? For example, authenticating me with a device keeps, tells the device or tells me that I am talking to the right device. But should we embed authentication into the communication protocol, which we often do? We often hide behind the comfort of double ratcheting and say, let's, mix the two. But that's not a very reasonable way to look at protocols. Now, to sum up, so what are the tools we know for anonymous communication protocols? One of them is, say, Tor or Brave. Apple allows us 3 email aliases as of now. And so, VPNs are there, DuckDuckGo, they are all there. So based on, we have a range of tools and systems that we can use to be secure. But the question then I would like to ask is that these protection, so that was the first part of what I wanted to discuss today, is that we evaluated end-to-end encrypted messaging applications and found that Signal, WhatsApp, and Telegram can be cloned fairly easily, while the others could not be cloned fairly easily. And there are interesting implications for mandated backdoors. If we put backdoors in our phones, then not only they can be used for mass surveillance or even framing us if somebody wants to. Like, say, for example, if the government today wants to frame me for something without me knowing about it. And actually, this has happened in India. In India, what happened was there was a Christian priest who used to work with tribals to protect their land. And, Father stands for me, and he eventually died in a prison. So they framed him. So there is this big businessman who wants to own the entire country. So he's friends with the prime minister. So they managed to put something in his device, in his computer. And eventually he was thrown into prison. And eventually he died at the age of 85, I think. So yeah, so things like this has happened in my country, and I'm sure in other countries they are happening as we speak. So mandated backdoors can lead to all sorts of bad things, and they also can have interesting policy externalities. As I said, that if WhatsApp decides to do content scanning in Android but not in Apple, then either people will kill Android or people will kill WhatsApp, one of these, and more likely Android. So, and then we kind of saw that there are tools, there are browsers, there are network layer anonymous communication channels like Tor we can use to stay anonymous. The question I now raise is, or I say, is that these protection mechanisms are disturbingly
Partha,
exclusory. Yeah, sorry.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. fascinating stuff. But just briefly in this context, how would I know if there is a mandatory backdoor? Is that knowable?
Well, for very sophisticated backdoors, no. But what you can do is you can see the link, say, for example, in case of WhatsApp or Signal or Element, etc. What you can do is you can see if your device is, they all say how many linked devices. So you can at least see how many devices are linked to your phone. That you can check. But if you ask me if there is a backdoor in your phone, and is there a way to conclusively say yes or no, I am not aware, honestly, because nation states have phenomenal capabilities to do things. Okay, say for my Apple, for our Apple phones, somebody is always looking at that phone. Now we think it's Apple, it's legitimate, fine, but somebody is always looking at that phone. And so towards the end of this talk, I kind of end by saying security needs institutions to protect it, or privacy needs institutional backing to protect it. But I am not aware of a way to say, okay, this is a backdoor that's in my phone. Like we had the instances of Pegasus. So only I think after a point, Apple informed people who were surveilled that you have something in your phone that's looking at your messages and other things. Does that answer the question, Stephen?
Yes, depressingly, yes. Thank you.
Depressingly, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so in the second part of this this talk, I would like to say that this protection mechanisms that we have, they are disturbingly exclusive. They don't allow everybody to participate online in a manner they can and they value. So we have created a situation of haves and have nots. So people with security and privacy haves, and people who do not have access to security and privacy. So people in better situations have access. People in less ideal situations do not have access. For example, so there was this case in the UK, which Francis Thomas's coronation report said that Francis Thomas was a child who was seeking help, and the school and everybody knew about it, that she needs help. But the device that was supplied to her for her studies, etc., exposed her to harmful content, and eventually she took her life. Now, okay, I am involved in, not before that, but after that. So I think UK has started accrediting these systems. So I am also involved in the accreditation work of content filtering and monitoring solutions that is deployed in UK schools. So she was exposed to harmful content, and eventually she took her life. And a very general observation is, like I saw it with my mother as well, that often old people are told that you have to use an app. And actually, I saw it also. I experienced it once for my flight from UK to Spain was cancelled, and there were a lot of old people at the Bristol airport, and most of them were told by the airport staff there that we cannot help you. Download an app, and many of their tickets were bought by either their son or their daughter, and then they were told you to download an app, and it was night, and they were told you go to a hotel or somewhere, and then you submit a claim through an app. So it's quite cruel, I would say, to now. So that led me to a research that I do with capability approach, apart from the other software security research I do, which is I ask questions that why things are so exclusory, and what can we do about it. So we said that human life is diminished and battered in many ways. So we need a broad framework to capture all the ways human life is diminished and battered. So I suggested, or I kind of looked at other disciplines, and proposed the use of capability approach. So it was suggested by a Nobel laureate economist from Cambridge long back, I think in '79. He said that, instead of asking whether somebody is able to, instead of being very utilitarian, one should evaluate what opportunities individuals have to make use of something. So we can give somebody a resource. For example, uh, if a functioning we want to achieve is to being mobile, now there are people without legs. So should we provision cycle to somebody who doesn't have legs? Because to be able to cycle, there are two conditions. One is this: the person should be of able body, and there should be good and paved roads, or and safe roads as well. So evaluation of individual opportunities is important in the provisioning of security systems, or privacy systems. We cannot just build a system. So I was in the industry for 10, 15 years, and I honestly, I won't hesitate to admit, nobody ever came to me and asked me that, how would a person without eyes use this system? How would a person without, with limited vision use this system, or with slow fingers, or with arthritic hands would use this system? Nobody ever asked me, and I was working at a reasonably big company. So this is something I also focus on while I think about systems and security of systems. And that is why I say that privacy needs institutions and environment. They For example, there are geographies where you cannot use Tor. There are countries where you cannot use VPN. There are countries, where even the internet is shut down. So there are periods when they just shut down the internet. And on top of that, you have Doge like, and we always used to think of countries, maybe third world countries or else, but now we are seeing in the US as well that, they just, they come with a hammer and destroy everything. So privacy needs, so maybe I'm sounding very pessimist here, but privacy to survive needs institutions and environment. And one of the things we saw was, apart from awareness, access. So we did on a research on people over 65, if with respect to their adoption of security advisories by the government, etc. So we saw barriers in terms of emotional state, trust, finance, etc. But also political climate. Political climate is also important as an enabler to use privacy systems and to be able to live a private life. So that's also important. Now the question is, so what's the way forward? So the question is, can capability approach help? So we kind of explored that capability approach at the policy layer is important. So it will do an evaluation of individual opportunities. It will do an assessment of barriers, and that would inform tech policy. For example, for children, there is a policy on YouTube that, the recommender algorithm should be turned off if it's a child going. Similarly, can there be defaults for cybersecurity based on age groups, based on circumstances, based on situations? For example, what are the defaults for people in the United States now to navigate everything that's going on there? So this is very contextual, and this should be provisioned based on an understanding of the needs of people there. So, and then we can develop inclusively secure software. So, and a few themes for possible future research, does financial poverty relate to digital privacy and security? When intuitively it does. Some of the research that's done at Bristol by Marvin and part of the Equitable Privacy Project, they do look at things like this. can capability approach help us? And also, how can capability approach inform system developers and policymakers to make systems better and policies better as well? Okay, yeah. So that's my talk today. I hope I was within time and it was useful.
Thanks very much, Partha. Yeah, very informative and slightly frightening and fascinating as well. I have lots of questions, but I'll open the floor to everybody else first in case they want to. We have plenty of time for discussion, which is great. So I'll open the floor to people who have questions or comments. Yeah, Costas.
Hi, thank you for this amazing talk.
I can barely hear you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry, I forgot my microphone up. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this amazing talk. So I found very interesting this concept of security and privacy poverty. I had not heard of it before, but it makes a lot of sense. Uh, and one of the aspects that I'm thinking about the financial poverty, in many cases, economists accuse people of being irrational and making wrong financial decisions. But there is a very good counter to it that the cognitive resources necessary for people to be able to handle these decisions are not there. They don't have the time, they don't have the. So, do you think that there's some kind of analogy there as well? So, in terms of the cognitive resources that people need in order to handle security and privacy poverty, and how can we address this?
Yes, definitely. It resonates with what we see in the domain of security. That we always responsibilize people. For example, there was a data breach in the UK, and almost all UK academics suffered due to that data breach because all their pensions are with a company called USS. And so when USS was breached, and then the USS came back to all the academics and told them that you have to do certain things to protect yourself. Now, first, the individuals or the academics who subscribed to USS or who paid their money to USS every month, they did not sign up for this, but they were now responsibilized to protect themselves. Now, like for example, they were told that you have to go to Experian every month and check your credit report, and you have to do monitoring and all these things. So not only cognitive ability, but also they don't have the resources to do this as well. Now, we sometimes, like, we do security, often it might seem okay, it's easy. It's not easy to do. Like, for example, my mother also lost all her access to her bank account, almost, because she could not sign after a point in time, and she also lost her vision. So it's not just cognitive, but also environmentally, or in terms of access to resources. People do not have that, and have all the means necessary to participate safely in a digital first society. And the way capability approach can, and that's where we say that capability approach can help, because capability approach is used to distribute food through UN. So, but that distribution of food is done through an assessment of opportunities of individuals. For example, in some parts of the world, there might be more rice, but in some parts of the world, there might be less rice. So you don't give rice to in those parts of the world, or in some parts of the world, you need to give food to children, not to adults, for example. So, so that is how food should be provisioned in different parts of the world. Similarly, in tech, if we do an assessment of individual opportunities and then provision tech, and then do policies to mandate provisioning, I think that is one of the way forward that I think can help us. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, it does. So in a way, if I understood correctly, the idea is that we have to have a better way to evaluate the needs of specific groups and have targeted kind of
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Christoph.
Yes, thank you so much, Partha. Very interesting talk. My question relates to Constance's question quite a bit, but from a different direction, because I'm wondering whether this is a problem that also relates back to the competence performance issue. So even if people know that they should take certain measures, the effort is too high, and then say, well, actually, I don't care if someone else violates my privacy, looks at my data, whatever, because it's very difficult to know downstream what your data is used for. So do you see any like initiatives or something that help educate the people to first actually implement some of these techniques and then subsequently show them how to do it?
Well, I'm not a fan of pushing things on the individual. In case of security, we all understand the factual. The factual is that, we have to be responsible, we have to be we have to have some level of competency, etc., etc. And we all our studies, all our efforts are on studying the factual. Okay. Now, but we have never studied the counterfactual. We have never asked the question that if a person was fully able, fully skilled, and say, for example, fully motivated to apply all the protection mechanisms, will that lead to a better security outcome? This is also, I personally think this is a very important question to ask, because studying the factual is and making and assigning responsibilities based on the factual is studying the reality partially, not fully. So if people are motivated, if they are skilled, and if they have all the resources and they are happy to apply all the security practices, will that lead to a better security outcome? Now, intuitively, let me tell you, that's purely intuition without science. It doesn't seem so, because as you saw, Dodge is a cyber attack. If we accept what Brushna says, that Dodge is a cyber attack, which I do, in spite of everything, you being prudent and you being secure, you being, with the best intentions, your data is lost. And what I'm hearing, this is very disturbing, to be honest. What I'm hearing now, that the internet connection to White House is now provided by Starlink. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing. I don't know. I don't have a concrete. So in spite of everything you do, it's gone. So I think the study of the counterfactual in security is also important, because we hardly study the counterfactual. We always base all our decisions on the factual, that human being. So we often say, that's how the privacy paradox problem came by, that the individuals don't value their privacy. But social choice theory has said so many things on individual rationality. Okay, but we never brought all those information in. Yeah, I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just, if I may, talk about counterfactuals a bit more?
Yeah, please.
I was in Philadelphia last year in the middle of summer on a very hot day when some security update on Windows brought most air traffic to a halt worldwide. And I was supposed to fly home that evening, and it was a pretty terrifying day, even though ultimately my flight did operate because it was late in the evening. Now, that was a mistake and shut down a lot of the global economy for half a day at least. Here's my question and my concern. Can the same thing be achieved on purpose? I would imagine the answer to that is obviously yes. If you can make a mistake, you could also do something stupid on purpose. But more importantly, can you target specific countries or continents and just basically shut them down by putting something into the next Windows update that gets pushed out to every laptop, let's say in Europe, in the EU, any country critical of Trump, Canada, the 51st state, can they shut down selectively economies around the world through Trojan horses in updates when the government is telling Microsoft to do that? I don't think Microsoft would want to do that, but if it's a choice between El Salvador prison camps or doing it, then I think a lot of people at Microsoft will obey. Is that at all possible? Is there protection against that?
Well, technically it is possible. The answer is technically, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Now, we do have protections in the form of, for example, now this is where, less connected countries are at a advantage. Okay. Though, there are many countries who are still not very digital. Okay. For example, my country, if you see, we are more than 1 billion, and I think we supply most of the software engineers in the world, but still that's very, very, very small number. Okay. So we are not that digitally enabled mostly till now, So there are countries who are less. For example, in the 60s, when India nationalized the banks, or in the 2008, when there was a global recession, we were largely immune to that, okay, protected from the global recession. Now, in case of technology, it is possible to do that. But if you go back to the CrowdStrike example even, the critical systems, the airline ticketing was affected, but not what happens inside this control towers or the safety critical systems. They were not affected. So there was this gap between what runs the capitalist economy, which is the airline ticketing and all these things, that was affected, but not the critical systems, which is away from it. So this is the solution, and this solution, I think this separation exists largely, okay, across the globe. And even a better separation is some systems are yet to be that digitally connected. If you are connected, yes, you are at a risk. But if you are not connected, you are not.
Okay, good. Well, that's somewhat encouraging. Okay, any other questions? Anyone else?
Hello, I'll pose a question.
Yeah, go for it, Henry.
Thank you for the talk, Partha. Interesting. I'm curious about, I guess, how common a certain perspective is that you mentioned earlier in the talk within the, I guess, broader IT community, but also specifically privacy and security. Yeah.
So, what do you mean by how common? Yeah, sorry, I think your question is.
Yeah, I'm still getting the question out. So, the perspective you mentioned, I believe privacy has needs institution and environment, and Tobias Feibig was part of the last conference, and I looked into some of his stuff, and he was mentioning a similar perspective, and I'm wondering, we could take that, that communal or that community perspective seems would just benefit in a lot of different domains, including much outside of IT. And so I'm wondering, in IT, do you have a sense of how common that perspective is of the people that are responsible for building these infrastructures, communicating certain importances about these infrastructures? Is that a clear question?
Well, in where I work, or the associations we have through reference, there is a recognition that security needs, regulatory or institutional backing, but is it common to people outside the community? I won't think so, because often, and there was an interesting article by Phil Rodgway, The Moral Character of Cryptographic Work. So he gave a talk at a conference it was a keynote, and that later on became he printed it in a paper. It's called The Moral Character of Cryptographic Work. And there he says that privacy is inherently political, number one. And since privacy is political, it allows people to be anonymous from the government, or from others. So that essentially prevents more investment in privacy. So eventually you see investments or research grant in privacy goes down, because that's not what the governments want. So the problem is twofold. One is the lack of acknowledgement that yes, it needs a policy push. Like if you see, every moral need has always benefited from policy push. For example, affirmative action, equalities, not discriminating in jobs, etc. They have all benefited from policy push. So me and Karen Reynolds, we wrote a paper last year on this, the need for a policy push for privacy, etc. In IEEE special issue. So yes, so I won't say the awareness is much outside the community, but within the community, to some extent, I would say yes. But honestly, I work in one of the, I am quite lucky to be where I am. So people around me, they are quite aware and supportive of this kind of things. But maybe that's not the case everywhere.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Any other questions or comments? Anyone? Well, if not, then yeah, let's wrap it up. Thank you, Partha, again for coming and talking to us. Very informative.
Thank you.
I've been upgrading my security to the extent possible over the last few months since the election in November. And I think I don't know, I feel a tiny bit more secure, but I also realize that, as you said, nation states are extremely powerful and they can probably penetrate my VPN, in 10 seconds flat. So, but still, we have to try, I think.
Yep.
So, okay. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.